Okay, in this lesson, we're going to look at how can we measure the weather. And the first thing that you should already now be aware of is that the weather is made up of lots of parts, or things that we call the elements of the weather. In today's lesson, we're going to look at the instruments that we use to measure those different parts, and we're also going to look at the units of measurement that we record each of these elements of the weather in. I'm going to go through each of the different elements, 6 of them, and you should use this information to complete the assignment that I've set you. One final thing is, and it's a rather important question, why do we actually record the weather? Why do we need to know about the elements of the weather and how we measure it? Well, the reason for that is that meteorologists, and these are the people that actually measure and predict the weather, need to know what the weather is like right now if they want to be able to predict what the weather is going to do in the near future. Also, if you know what the weather is like in one place, it's possible to then work out what the weather is going to be in another place. And that's because weather moves. So let's start thinking about each of the elements of the weather, the instrument used to record it and how it works, and also the units. And what you want to make sure you do is, as I go through each of the elements of the weather, you record the units, descriptions of how the instrument works, find yourself a picture of that instrument as well. Okay, our first element is rainfall. So this is when water comes out of the sky. And rainfall is measured using an instrument known as a rain gauge. So that is the instrument used to record this particular element. Now, how does it work? Well, it works by having a bottle, which we can see at the bottom here. And the bottle has a funnel in it. And both the bottle and the funnel are actually inside a large metal cylinder. Okay. Now, when it rains, the rainwater comes in through the top, and I'll just show you that. There we are. Hits the funnel, and the funnel collects it in the bottle. What you then need to do is take the bottle at the end of every day, pour the water that's collected out of the bottle into a measuring jug, and actually then record the amount of water that fell out of the sky. Now, the unit that is used to measure rainfall is millimeters. That is mm. Okay, and that's the unit we use to record the amount of rain that falls out of the sky. The final part of this task, and you can pause it now if you wish, is to where you need to then find a picture of a rain gauge to go with your description. Okay, our next element is the temperature. And temperature is recorded using a thermometer. That's the instrument. And we can see a diagram of a thermometer here. And the way the thermometer works is down here, we've got a small glass bulb, a bit like a light bulb, but it's really small. And inside it, we've got a very special metal called mercury. And what makes it special is it is the only metal that is liquid, like water. Now, this metal has got some special properties, and those properties are that when the metal warms up, when the temperature gets warmer, the metal expands, it grows, and what that does is it forces the mercury up a small little thin glass tube that runs up the middle of the thermometer, and that's what's shown in this red. And when the mercury gets cold, it contracts, it shrinks, and it moves back down the little glass tube. And as long as you've got the units up the side, you can record what the temperature is. So that's how the thermometer works. Now, the units used to record temperature, it depends where you are in the world. In the United Kingdom, we use degrees Celsius or degrees centigrade, and that is, by the way, the same thing. In Europe and North America and most of the rest of the world, they use a different scale, and it's called Fahrenheit or degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Let's have a look at before we look at our third, you should now find a photograph to go with your description for the thermometer. Our third instrument is used to measure the wind direction, and we can see it here. It's called the Windvane, sometimes also called a weather vane. It works by the wind striking a large metal plate on the back of an arrow, which pushes the arrow into the direction where the wind is blowing from. So all you've got to be able to do is make sure that this arrow is on a small little device that allows it to spin freely. Okay, and the wind strikes the metal plate, pushing the arrow in the direction that the wind is coming from. And that's important, where it comes from. So what are the units used to measure wind direction? Well, you've come across these units before in the map skills topic. These are the compass directions: north, east, south, and west. So we talk about winds coming from the north or the south or the east or the west or the southwest. You want to now go and find a photograph of a weather vane or a wind vane like this one and insert it into your class task. Right, our fourth element is wind speed. So it's obviously connected to wind direction. Wind comes from somewhere and travels in a direction, but it also has a speed. And the instrument used to measure the speed is shown here. It's the anemometer. We can see a picture of an anemometer right here. It works by having 4 little cups. The wind strikes one cup, pushing it backwards, which then causes another cup to replace where the previous cup was, which is then struck by the wind and it's pushed backwards. And this starts spinning a bit like a windmill. The stronger the wind, the faster these turn. So what units do we use to measure wind speed in? Well, now that depends where you are in the world. So in the United Kingdom, the most common way of measuring wind speed is either in miles per hour, or mph, or knots. That's K-N-O-T-S. You'll often hear sailors talk about wind speed in terms of knots. In North America, they will talk about kph, kilometers per hour. And there is actually also a scale called the Beaufort scale, which I'm showing you on your screen. And it's a scale from 0 to 12. And 12 is the strongest type of wind that you can get, hurricane winds. And 0 means there is no wind at all. And you can see little descriptions. So there are a number of units and scales we use to measure wind speed. Our fifth element is known as air pressure. Now that is the weight of the air. And if there's a lot of air around us pushing down on the surface where we are, and when I say the surface of the Earth, then we have a high pressure. And if the air is all rising away from us up towards the sky, then we have a low pressure. Now, the instrument that measures that is known as the barometer, that we can see on our screen there. Here is a picture of a barometer. Behind this device, there is a small little contraption. It's almost like a little balloon with air in it. And as the air pressure increases, the balloon expands, and that pushes the little arrow this way. And as the air pressure drops, the little balloon collapses and the arrow moves this way. It's the same kind of thing that happens to, for example, a football or a rugby ball in winter. You'll notice it sometimes feels quite deflated, and that's because the air inside it's got quite cold and it's contracted. But sometimes if it's really hot, then the air inside the balloon or the ball or the rugby ball can get really expanded and it becomes really hard. So that's how the barometer works. Okay. The units of measurement for air pressure are called millibars. So that's spelled M-I-L-L-I-B-A-R-S, millibars. And they measure the weight of the air. Our final element are clouds or cloud cover. Now, it is measured using your own eyes. So the actual instrument is your eyesight. You look up to the sky. And what you need to do is calculate the amount of the sky that's covered in clouds. So in this photo, we can see very small amount of sky covered in clouds. Here we can see quite a lot. And here we can see about half of the sky is covered in clouds. So there isn't any other instrument other than looking up and estimating. Now, when you estimate, you calculate the amount of eighths. So you imagine the sky as a fraction, and your fraction in this case is eighths. And if the sky is completely covered and you can't see a single bit of blue, you would have 8 eighths, also known as 8 octas. So octas is the actual unit. Now, so this is an unusual way of measuring the amount of the sky that's covered. It's a very old way, and it's just kind of stuck over the years. If you can't see a single cloud, you have a clear sky, you have 0 octas. If you have half of your sky covered in clouds, like we can see here, you would have 4 octas of cloud cover. If you couldn't see the sky at all, because maybe there was a fog, then you would actually have what's called sky obscured. But the unit is octas. And there's no special device other than looking up and estimating the number of eighths of the sky that's covered. Okay, so let's just do a quick review. Today's lesson has looked at 6 main elements of the weather. I've introduced the instrument that measures. I've described how that instrument works. And I've told you the units used to record that particular element. One final part of this task is where you need to find a picture to go with your description.